Welcome to the Redeemed Man podcast. I'm Nathan Dewberry, part of the team here at the Redeemed. Thank you for joining us today. At the Redeemed, we're building a Christ-centered community of men, where men don't just survive, but they thrive in their relationships and their walk with Christ. We believe in the power of meaningful conversations that inspire, challenge us, and bring us closer together. In each of our episodes, we dive into our guests' stories, their struggles, and their victories in their faith. In this episode, I would love for you to welcome Leonce Crump. Pastor Leonce is an international speaker, author, and former NFL athlete, known for his passionate leadership and commitment to cultural renewal through the church. He's the co-founder and senior pastor of United Church in Atlanta, Georgia, where he serves alongside his wife, Brianna. A sought-after voice on topics ranging from leadership to justice, Leonce is the author of Renovate, Changing Who You Are by Loving Where You Are, and co-author of The Resilience Factor. With nearly 2 decades in ordained ministry and a background in athletics, he brings a unique blend of grit, grace, and gospel-centered wisdom to every conversation. Pastor Leonce and Brianna live in Atlanta with their 3 daughters and son. Welcome to the show, Leonce. Welcome to the show, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. It's good to be here with you, Nate.
Well, let's take it back. I've got to find out how you got from now serving in pastor to a brief stint in the NFL.
Yeah, I went to Oklahoma University, and I actually went there to wrestle. My wrestling coach said that he would allow me to play football, but once I got there, that became a point of tension.
Yeah.
But my freshman year, I was an All-American wrestler, heavyweight, and so then I had a little bit of leverage, and I went out and went for the football team anyway. And so I ended up playing a couple seasons for Oklahoma, and I didn't know what I wanted to do exactly after school. I thought I would go into law. That was kind
Yeah.
of a passion, and I actually later did get a master's degree in case law. But the Lord was like, "You're going to go into ministry." But before all that, my very good friend Tommy Harris, who many are probably familiar with, he was a multi-time Pro Bowl defensive tackle. He said, "Hey man, you should at least take a shot and see if you can make a team." And so I ended up signing with the Atlanta Falcons and spent some time here. And then I was traded to the Saints. And so now to come back to Atlanta, I'm both a son and a trader at the same
Yes,
time.
yes.
And then I spent some time with St. Louis and with Washington. But all along, I knew what the Lord was calling me to do. I just wanted to do it on my timeline.
Yeah.
I wanted to do it on my path. And I thought, honestly, I thought it was a pretty good plan. Play for 5 years, get my full pension, then go into vocational ministry, never have to take a salary from the church. Like I thought it was a great plan. And God had other plans. And so just short of 3 years, my NFL career came to a close. And um, I relented to what God was inviting me to do, and so I took on the role of a college minister in a little town called Ottawa, Tennessee, right outside of
Yeah.
Chattanooga,
Yeah. Close to
and that
Cleveland.
is, yeah, very close to Cleveland, where my wife went to school. My wife went to Lee University, and now my eldest daughter is starting Lee University this fall. So
Awesome.
so that's how that transition happened. I always knew, as a matter of fact, that, and I don't know if you can find it now, but do you remember the old Sports Illustrated, the magazine?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they did a whole article on me called The Preacher, and it was about my faith and about football and this whole journey, and it was pretty cool. So I did faithfully serve the Lord while I was playing, and I did hope to play longer, but you we man makes his plans, but God is the one who orders the steps. So
Yes.
here we are.
Well, it's obvious you've shared that your faith was already a part of your life in that season. Can you talk to me a little bit about your upbringing and really the establishment of that relationship you have with the Lord?
Yeah, I grew up a part-time Catholic. I don't know if you know much about Louisiana, but we don't have counties, we have parishes
Yes.
because it's divided up by the Catholic diocese. And so We were Christmas and Easter, wedding and funeral Catholics. And that was kind of the bulk of my understanding of God and the church and everything through my entire youth, pretty much.
Mm.
When I was about 9, my mother started having these dreams that turned out to be memories of a significant trauma of sexual abuse, and she shares her story publicly, so there's no shade on her there, and it just pushed her over the edge mentally and emotionally, and she went out into our backyard with my father's 38 snub nose with 6 bullets in the chamber in this revolver, and she pulled the trigger 6 times, but the gun wouldn't fire.
Mm.
And then she threw the gun goes off. Her immediate thought is, she's sharing this with me almost 20 years later. Her immediate thought was, I'm so broken, I can't even kill myself right. And that day, the Lord grabbed her heart.
Oh, wow.
And then almost 7 years later, a friend of my father, Johnny Hollins, who he worked with at Exxon Chemical, invited him to church. And I tell people all the time, you never know the power of an invitation,
So true.
because that invitation changed the trajectory of my life. My mother was going to church, but me and my dad and my brother were not. And when Johnny made that invitation, and it was to Bethany World Prayer Center, which you will be familiar with,
Yes.
that's where I became a Christian. Um, Johnny made that invitation, and my dad said, "Okay, well, I'll go because it's my friend." And that night at this men's event, God got his heart, and he became a Christian. And a couple of weeks after that, a young man named Judah Vidros discovered that not only were we going to church together, but he lived around the corner from me. So he started showing up at the basketball court where I played basketball every day, inviting me to youth group. And I finally relented after several weeks of harassment. I always tell people he harassed me into the kingdom. After several weeks of harassment and being made fun of by my friends, because this little Tom Cruise looking kid was coming up trying to tell us all about Jesus every day. I went to the youth ministry that night. Pastor Adam McCain was the pastor at the Bethany Youth Ministry at the time, and I heard the gospel for the first time. I remember it vividly. I was standing in the back of the room with Judah. I had on wind pants, and I had one leg pulled up during that LL Cool J
Oh, yeah.
phase, and a t-shirt and a flat bill ball cap, blue Chuck Taylors. Like, I remember it vividly. And I remember just weeping as he explained what Jesus had done for us, and that he wanted us, no matter what we've done, no matter where we've been, no matter how we've hurt other people or been hurt by people, that Jesus wanted us. And I began to cry, as I said, and I turned to Judah. And he, at this time I was about 6'2". I grew 3 more inches once I got to college, but I was about 6'2" at this time. And Judah was about 5'7". And I turned to Judah and I looked down and I'm like, "What's happening to me?" And he goes, "That's the Holy Spirit, man. He's saving you." And that was and that was the beginning of my walk with Jesus. And that guy walked alongside of me until I graduated and went on to the University of Oklahoma.
What a beautiful story of redemption, Leonce. I mean, I think that's so many of us can relate to that moment where we really felt the Lord drawing us and it's like, what's going on? I know I want this. I know my heart is beating and what is happening. So
Oh yeah.
thank you for sharing that story. I know there's so much that goes into your journey and we can't unpackage it all here today, but I would love to really focus on. So all this, we kind of get a foundation of your faith, but then you feel a call to a specific city. Talk to
Mm.
me a little bit about that and what God stirred in your heart for the city of Atlanta, and then even for maybe other guys who are listening that really feel a call to ministry, but they're wrestling with that thought of a specific place and how they might can unpackage what God's saying to them with regards to their location.
Yeah, well, I mean, I got to start honest and say I did not want to come here. I am in an interracial marriage. My wife is from California, and when we got married in Tennessee, we moved just north of Knoxville. And my wife got her first real taste of prejudice and racism, and it was very, very hard on her. In fact, one vivid memory among many was one night we were at the Olive Garden, and she heard this man whisper under his breath, "I can't believe she's with that N word." And it just really shook her. And so he was decided that we were getting out of the South. She didn't want to do this anymore, even though I grew up in the South my whole life. And of course, because that's my wife, I said, okay, well,
Yeah.
let's start looking around. And so we knew God was calling us to plant a church, and we investigated my hometown in Louisiana. We also looked at New Orleans. We looked at Sacramento, and actually there was a brief period there where I was entertaining taking over the church she grew up in, but we just did not feel the Lord's draw in that moment. And one day I got a random email, and I won't bore you with all the details, but it was from a recruiter hired by North Point Ministries. When North Point was doing their 30 and 30 years church planning strategy, he had found me through my blog. He invited me to go through a series of interviews. I did, and that whittled it down from 250 candidates to five. And so I got an American Idol like phone call, like, "Hey, you're in the top five." And I said, okay. And so I was trying to plan for the interview here in person in Atlanta, and we set it up where when I flew back into Atlanta, because I was going on a missions trip to Cambodia, that I would just roll straight into this interview. So my wife met me down here. We had the interview and realized pretty quickly that there just wasn't a match with what they were trying to accomplish and what was in my heart. And so in my mind, I'm like, great, I'm free of
Yeah.
Atlanta. I'm out of here. And when we were driving back, we got lost in the Atlanta neighborhood, Grant Park, um, and just ended up driving in circles for a couple blocks looking for a gas station. And almost, and I will say almost audibly, I've never heard the audible voice of God, but there's been four times where it felt like a lightning bolt to my chest. One was marrying my wife. One was moving to Atlanta. Uh, and and I sat there and I was so shocked, and this will give you the context. I was so shocked the light turned green and I didn't move because I was so lost in this weight that I was suddenly feeling for this place and for these people. And so we got back to Tennessee. I didn't say a word to my wife. And about 2 days later, in the middle of the night, when all wives get their best ideas, she she wakes me up and she says, "Hey, I think we're supposed to go to Atlanta." And I hadn't said anything to her. And so we began to pray about it, and the Lord confirmed it in a bunch of ways. And so without a sending church, without any money, without any team, we loaded up a 14-foot U-Haul with our entire little two-bedroom apartment in it. I Tetris packed it and then drove my motorcycle into the cubby hole that was left in there, and we drove it down to Atlanta. And that's how how we began our ministry. And so we, very much, and I think I was heavily influenced by the mission field because we didn't have any money. We didn't have a building. So we just started talking to people and having small Bible studies in our living room and going to art shows and going to local events and throwing some local parties and events. And all of that gave us enough groundswell over 3 years, by the way, to finally have a public launch in 2011. And that was the beginning of our church, of our first church plant, we say now. But that's how we got to Atlanta. And, for anybody who's wrestling with their calling, um, I think the primary grid I would use is where's the intersection of your passion and your pain
Yeah.
and your life experiences? Um, Atlanta made perfect sense for us at that intersection for so many reasons. And we kind of took our little Abrahamic call, and the rest is history.
Yeah, it's amazing to me because I remember those days and again keeping up with the distance when you guys were kind of in that neighborhood and what you were doing, and then yet now you guys are on the north side of town.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, and then the tension that you had to work through in your own heart of going, all right, God, here's the city and the location I feel planted in, and yet God's doing something different, and being okay with releasing kind of your own desires.
Yeah, that was man, that was a very, very hard time. Um, I really felt a distinct pull toward urbanity. I was heavily, heavily influenced by Dr. Tim Keller, still am. But we had kind of reached this critical point. I always tell young pastors now, at every phase, there's going to be a point where philosophy and reality meet and they don't match. And at that point, you've got to choose philosophy or reality. And so we were at that point. Our church was growing like crazy. We were in three services. We had 35 parking spaces. Um, do you know Sean Lovejoy?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, Lovejoy came to visit our church, and he said, "Man, I don't know anybody would want to come to church here. There's nowhere to park, and you got to walk through the auditorium to get to the kids' space." I mean, it was a miracle of God, what was happening there. And we kind of had these two values that were running on parallel tracks. We had this value of creating this Revelation 7, you know, expression of the church, every tribe, every tongue, every nation, this beautiful multi-ethnic church rooted in the gospel and biblical theology, not social nonsense. And then we had this like draw toward the urban center, and they worked together until they didn't, and then they became competition. And so we went through a lengthy discernment process as a team and just asked the Lord, what is our primary value? Because we were looking for a bigger space all over the city. But if you've ever been to the city of Atlanta, you know that finding a space big enough for almost, 1,800 people, it's just not feasible. All the
No.
churches in the city tend to have smaller footprints. And so we couldn't find anything. Our realtor was trying to convince us to expand our search circle. And so we entered this 5 or 6 month discernment and prayer process to say, okay, we've got these two values, urban and multi-ethnic, and one of them has to win out um, for us to continue to go
Yeah.
forward. And we really felt that our primary driver was creating a Revelation 7 church. And the soil for that in Atlanta could be rich in many, many, many places. And so we expanded our search, and within 3 weeks, the building that we're in right now came onto our radar. And that even is a miracle of God. It was for sale for $13 million. Okay, we were a church of like 50% college students at the time. We were poor. We were big and poor. And people would say, like, why can't you do more in the community? I'm like, because we're poor. There's a lot of people here, but we don't have any money. Um, and so I was like, there's no way this is going to
Yeah.
happen. But my friend Nathan Art convinced me to put an offer in anyway. He had found the bank records somehow. And he was like, this is what they actually owe. The rest of this is interest that the bank is trying to collect. So just make an offer at what they owe. 5 months went by, we heard nothing. And then I got a phone call one day randomly, and they were like, hey, are you still interested in this building? And I said, yeah. And we ended up closing on that property in December of 2019 for $4.2 million, which is, you know,
Insane.
ridiculous. 12 and a half acres, 120,000 square feet, 1 mile from where the Braves play.
Yeah.
Only God can do that.
Amen.
Only God
Amen.
can do
That's
that.
so true.
And so those things were just little confirmations along the way of, yes, my heart was for the urban poor, and we locked in, bro. We lived there through drive-by shootings. We lived there through murders at our favorite restaurants. Me and my kids and my wife, like we stuck it out. And And so I felt like a little bit of a sellout.
Yeah.
And I had to work through those emotions. But I'll never forget Joby Martin. I was whining, about about selling out and all this stuff. He said, "Look, man, can you preach?" I said, "Well, I mean, I think so. Can you preach?" "Yes, I can preach. Find the biggest building you can, fill it up, and then plant as many little churches back into the urban core as you want to." And that just opened it up for me. And so that is the journey that we're on currently, and it's been a fun ride.
Well, in 25 years, you may be the urban core of Atlanta anyway, with where you
I
guys are
mean,
as things
listen,
continue to shift.
it's insane, man. I mean, truly. I mean, this, yeah, the sprawl of this place is crazy, and you're
Yeah.
exactly right. I mean, maybe in 15.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're the location you are. I mean, it's wild when you go up in that area and just the growth and the continual change and development. And my in laws live on the north side of town up in Cumming, and you get to Cumming, and it used to feel like you were out away from the city, and now in a lot of ways you feel like you're still a part of the city, which is just crazy to me. The growth and the urban sprawl of Atlanta. So
Oh yeah.
no telling what God has in store, but it is you guys have seen so much is God scripting a story way better than you could ever write on your own, and that's the beauty of all of it is he knows his people, and he knows the heart he has for those who are not yet a part of the family, and doing everything he can to set people up and make them in strategic locations. So thank you for sharing your story of kind of how God brought you to where you are today. So excited about that. Also, I want to know, like you I think do a really good job of this. How do you marry, and I'm sure some of this probably comes from some Tim Keller approach, your love for knowledge growth, continually like diving deep into the scripture, and yet putting things on the bottom shelf and focusing on the relational side of God? Because I think in the church, oftentimes those two things can get really out of whack.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, I would say Keller, Alistair Begg, who is kind of lesser known than a Tim Keller. Howard Thurman is another. Tony Evans is another. Those are men that influenced my preaching and really shaped my perspective to say I want to take the most complicated theological concept and I want to say it in a way that a child will at least grasp the heart of it. And that's kind of the lens that I preach everything through. And so, I write and I know it's heavily academic, and then I edit and I edit and I edit. And now I have Gemini. Gemini helps. And so I'll take 1,100 words and drop it in the Gemini and just give a command, make this sound less professorial.
Yeah.
And then that helps me to continue to hone that ability. And before Gemini, I just did it by hand. So Gemini is just saving me a few hours. Um, but I just it's accepting where people are
Hmm.
and putting the gospel
Yeah.
where they are. Jesus um could have explained his divinity and his humanity via the hypostatic union, and he could have used all that language, but instead he says, "I and the Father are one."
Yes.
And here's what this means. He could have talked about predestination versus non-predestination, and regeneration before profession versus regeneration after profession. He could have done all of that, but he said, "Hey, there's four types of soil. The seed is the same. It's the soil that determines what grows." And so I've just really, I think it's the hardest work I do, honestly, is taking an academic bent and making it approachable and palatable, so that if you're sitting there, like we have several Georgia Tech students and Georgia Tech graduates and engineers, super highly smart people. I don't want them to feel like they're not challenged, and I don't want my friend Jonathan, who we just helped get off the street, who has an eighth grade education. Um, I don't want him to feel talked over or talked at,
Yeah.
and that's the dance. When I can't do it through the text, and cut me off anytime if I'm rambling, but
No, it's good
when
stuff.
when I can't do it directly through the text because the text just is what it is, then I leverage illustrations,
Yeah,
and tell stories that help to bring those things alive. And my kids help. My daughters read my sermons sometimes ahead of
that's
time. They're
good.
like, "What does this even mean?" And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Okay, well, that means I need to revisit that. That's what that means. Because if you can't understand it, then I haven't done my job yet."
That's really good. I think that's something a word for somebody that's listening just right there is take it and let somebody else look at it and see what they pull out and what they go. Hey, I don't understand this, because then you're able to go. All right, now I can unpackage this and figure out new ways to communicate that. So excellent. I just love it. I love listening. I listened to one of your talks to men's night, and you started out with a story. Oftentimes, messages are built that way, but the way you started it really captivated your audience, put it in a practical way for men to understand what you're calling them up to, and a visual of what it looked like to be a protector and provider, and did an excellent job with it. And I think that is a gift that you have, but it's also a skill that you work at. As you shared, like it's something that you're
Yeah.
consistently trying to cultivate. And I think it's so important.
Yeah, well, and I will say two things on that if I can hop on that. Preaching is a craft and a gift. How gifted you are, only God determines that.
Yeah.
He can't, we can't do any more than that. But what we can do is work on the craft.
Yeah.
We can work on our tone. We can work on how we leverage our facial expressions. We can work on the honing and the crafting of words and economy of words and saying more with less. And then I think it's just so important to have a collaborative process. So, well, it'd take too long to get into all of it. I'll just tell you the end. Every single week, whatever I'm preaching on that Sunday, 7 people have the right to speak into it before before it gets there. And then I preach it to our entire staff on Wednesday. And so after reading it, now hearing it, they are able to offer even more feedback. Hey, that wasn't clear. Oh, that feels like an unnecessary landmine. Hey, why don't you say this way instead? And that collaborative process has made me better because it puts diverse perspectives in the room. I've got an African American woman. I've got a white woman. I've got an El Salvadorian woman. I've got a 22-year-old Gen Z black kid wearing a fishnet, you know, button-down shirt. I've got a 50-year-old white dude who was a Presbyterian minister for 25 years. So these diverse voices give me the ability to kind of see our congregation and how it's going to land with everybody. And then they give feedback that shapes the message and makes it better.
So good, Leonce. I think that work that you put in is definitely, I'm sure, paying off a lot of dividends in your congregation. Going, hey, I understand what he's saying. I understand where he's coming from in a way that they can approach it and apply it to their life.
Yeah, I sure hope so. It seems like it.
Well, knowing your heart and what you've created with the multi ethnic church, what are some of the challenges that you've experienced, and then some of those breakthrough moments along the way?
Yeah, I mean the biggest challenge falls into one bucket, man. We all want it the way we want it. that,
Selfishness.
that yeah, I mean that is the root of it, and we can try to dress it in other clothes,
Yeah.
but whether it's race or economics or education or ethnic background, which I prefer to race because I think there's only one race, it's the human race, but I
Amen.
use it because it's common parlance. But and there's no monoliths. Jamaicans are very different than Nigerians, very
Yes.
different than Ghanaians, very different than Sierra Leoneans, and they are hearing what I'm saying different, and they're receiving what I'm saying differently, and they have different desires. They want more upbeat Caribbean music. This Ghanaian lady is she was Episcopalian, so the room's too loud. Like everybody wants their own thing, and what we've tried to do um, is shape a culture that is so rooted and grounded in the scriptures that you're not arguing with me.
So good.
You're arguing with the word of God.
Yeah.
Now there's some contextual textures, like the Bible doesn't have much to say about drums or guitars or a LED wall or not, but the Bible is very, very clear that we prefer others is better than ourselves.
Yes.
And the Bible is very, very clear that we outdo one another in showing honor. And so if we can do that, if I can submit my preferences to your needs, then we can create this beautiful multi-ethnic environment that puts Jesus at the center. Colossians chapter 3 is one of my favorite kind of explanations of Paul's multi-ethnic ministry when he says, now therefore there's not Greek or Jew, slave or free, barbarian or Scythian, but Christ is all and in all. And what he's done there is cover the full spectrum of human division in four paired relationships: Jew and Gentile, barbarian and Scythian, slave, free. He's covered it all and said, no matter which one of these corners you start in, at the center is Jesus, and that is your primary identity.
Yes.
So I'm not a black man and then a Jesus follower. I'm a Jesus follower, and then it turns out from my 23andMe, a heavily multi-ethnic man. I had 15 different nationalities in here, man. It was crazy when that thing came back. And so, my primary identifier is Jesus, and that's what we drive people to.
Amen.
And it doesn't mean you set aside your 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 culture completely, but it does mean, according to Colossians chapter 3, that you divorce yourself from the aspects of your culture that diminish the image of God in others and that denies the work of God in others. You divorce yourself from those
Yeah.
pieces and then you hang on to everything else. And here's what happens. I tell people all the time, a truly multi-ethnic church is not a smoothie. It's a gumbo. A smoothie, you take a bunch of different ingredients, but then you blend it into a pink or brown or white goo,
Yeah.
and you can't taste the distinctions. They've just all become the same.
Mm.
But in a good gumbo,
Oh yeah.
right? In a good gumbo, you've got layers of flavors, and you've got chicken and sausage and shrimp and crab, and everything has maintained the constitution of how it was made. But together in that pot, it is better than it could ever be by itself. And that is the heart of a truly multi-ethnic movement.
Love that description. Makes me want to head over to New Orleans though and get
Listen,
some gumbo.
you don't have to go to New Orleans, man. Come to Atlanta.
Hey, I'm coming. I'm coming.
I
My
cook over
wife
here,
makes
bro.
some gumbo, but I don't know if it compares. So I'll have to come out and check it out. So well said though, and I think that's one of the things we enjoy so much about our online groups of having guys all across North America and some outside of North America. And when you lift up Jesus, there's a lot of things that just get a lot less important.
Yes.
And then it's also beautiful to have the different cultures, the different language. I love being in a group and hearing one of our guys in Boston speak with his thick Boston accent, and then have one of these Southern guys sound like me, and somebody from the Midwest, don't you know? And just that diversity of God's kingdom, and yet the
That's right.
beauty of how the gospel and how Jesus brings us together. And when we focus on Him, there are so many things that do get a lot less important.
Yeah. And the things that are important get brought together to create something more beautiful.
Yes.
If you listen to our worship, for instance, you hear flecks of 80s pop, Earth, Wind, and Fire, Hillsong, and Fred Hammond all kind of rolled into one sound. And we've really created our own sound from all of these voices contributing to how we lead worship and how we create music. And for me, that was always the goal. The goal was um, that everybody would be uncomfortable so that we could create something together in which we could all be comfortable. And it's been fun. It's been challenging. It's always going to be challenging. Political cycles make it more challenging for the first couple of years of anyone's term. If things just seem to get extra messy. It doesn't matter if it's red or blue. Um, but You navigate it in love. You call people to more. You remind them of who their king is,
Amen.
and then you press on.
Yeah. So you're also a father of four.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about some of the things you've learned that anybody can apply, whether they're a pastor or just leading in their local job, a business, to rhythms of your life, to prioritize your kids and your wife and cultivating that, especially when you have a lot of things to demand. Because most guys can relate to that and go, I got a lot of things pulling me. What are some rhythms I put into my life to prioritize my family and invest in those relationships?
Yeah, I'll come back to rhythms. I want to talk about motivations real quick. At the end of your life, I had one of my mentors say this to me. At the end of your life, when you're getting ready to go and be with the Lord, your final thoughts aren't going to be, I wish I had one more meeting. I wish I made one more million. I wish I built one more house. I wish I was this much more productive. No, those aren't going to be your thoughts. Your thought, unfortunately, for most of us, will be, I wish I had spent more time in investing in my relationships. My Alex Early, my best friend, he has this saying: all of our wealth is in our relationships. And so between he and Mike telling me to live my life backwards, I just took a step back, and I did not do this well early in our ministry. I was unhealthy. I was overweight. I was working 85 plus hours a week, thinking that's what I had to do to get this thing going. And my older two children really suffered for it. And it's astounding to me how tangible it is to see the difference in how they approach what I do and how my younger two approach what I do. And for those of you who have no context, my oldest is 17, my youngest is 7. You've never had a more palpable "what the heck am I doing" moment than when you're standing in CVS and you have feminine products in one hand for one child and diapers in the other hand for another child. You think, what have I done? And so, we have two different generations of kids. We have a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old, and then we have a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old. And how they relate to my work is so very different. And I really do believe that I'm the fulcrum in that, in the adjustments that I made to really living my life backward. And we've regained some ground. I mean, the word is powerful and true that the Lord will restore the years the locusts have eaten. And there's been some great restoration between me and my older two children, I believe. But some of the rhythms that I've put in place that have helped with that is one, keeping a Sabbath. I keep a Sabbath, and that Sabbath is built for not only spiritual rejuvenation, but also for delight.
Yeah.
So on Sabbath, we eat stuff we don't normally eat. I kind of have I don't say no policy. Now, if it's extreme or ridiculous, yeah. But like, can we have donuts? Yes. Can we get ice cream? Yes. Can we get candy? Yes. Can I have a burger? Can I have Chinese food? Can I have sushi? Yes, yes, yes. Like that's, and we've turned it into this thing where we delight in the good gifts of God and we delight in each other. And then when I'm really on my game, which I have been off a little bit prepping for Easter, but I do a weekly one-on-one with all my kids. And I haven't been as consistent with that as I would like to be. But I really do think that there is gold in that. Teenage girls aren't going to talk to you much, but you can sit and look at them while you drink a bubble tea. And every now and then something magnificent will filter out, or you'll find out something painful that they're dealing with that you had no idea. And that has really, really shaped a lot of our family. I have a hard cutoff time on work, 98% of the time because I get up early most days. So usually 4:30, I'm shutting it down, and I'm with the kids for the rest of the afternoon. I show up to their stuff. I host their teams. Like I really do my best so that they know that though I feel called to my work and I love my work, I love what I do, pales in comparison to how much I love them and how much I want to be with them. My wife and I, we keep a regular weekly date night, and then we also have an app that's been pretty fun. You kind of put in areas of strength and maybe areas of weakness in your marriage, and then the AI in it queues up questions for you guys to ask each other every day. And so even when we're busy and going in different directions, I'll get a nudge on my app and she's answered some question that the AI has asked, and now I'm responding to that. And that has opened up new conversations. And we've been together almost 20 years, and there's stuff that we're talking about just from this simple little tool that has never naturally come up in conversation. So those are a few of the rhythms I have that I think have been life-giving to my family and put me in a place of sustainable ministry. And I'm really banking. I'm banking on the Spirit's work in my work that He will He will produce more with less
So
than
good.
I will produce
Yes.
by trying to
Yes.
do it all in my strength. Yeah.
No, I love that you bring it all the way back to that, because I think that really is when you look at Sabbath of this. Do we believe that God's going to take care of us? There's this
Yeah.
rest in Him that all the other days we're working, and it looks like we need to work this day, but we're going to rest and trust Him for taking care of us. And I think when you do that, it builds so much faith into the other days of the week of going, God's got me. Like I've seen it time and time again where I rested. I put the things that were most important first, and God took care of the rest.
That's right. And He does every time.
Every time, every time. Well, Leonce, I have enjoyed this conversation, and if it works out, I definitely want to have you back on. I think there's 1,000 things we could talk about, but thank you so much for your time today. Thanks for sharing a little bit of your story. We're praying for you and your family and are so thankful for the ministry that you have in the city of Atlanta. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you.